All right. Who's kicking it off? Pass it around.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. So we're focusing on the Dakota Access Pipeline and specifically the Standing Rock storyline. And so this started in the early 2000s, but really you got focused in right around 2014 and kind of peaked in 2016. And it's just kind of gone off the radar a little bit as Trump has stepped into office. So you'll see a lot of the same themes that you guys have talked about already. It's kind of the big government versus the historical and natural side of things. And so you've got the right and left against each other. And basically, a lot of the claims were basically not really different, but just people saying the same claims, just picking a different side of the issue, whether it be environment or economic. So a lot of finger pointing, a lot of kind of immaturity on both sides in the end of it, and somewhat of a scattered battle. So that's the where we're starting. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So not gonna reach. Okay. Can I have notes, so thank you. Okay, so do you want to go to the next slide? Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're good. Okay, so the framing of the issue kind of like went over all the different categories that we've mentioned of like environment, health, historical and cultural, politics, so on and so on. So these are some specific ones that we found in our articles. And the first one is being contamination of water sources. So that was kind of like a water quality issue and the environmental side of it. So the Cannonball River, that was a river that is at the boundary of the Standing Sioux Reservation, so Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, and that's what converges with the Missouri River. So the issue there was that obviously that local source of water would be polluted for the community. And then on top of that, that goes into the Missouri River. So just a larger issue of that continuing to pollute on, as well as additional municipal areas. So in that, we see that there was an emphasis on needing more of an environmental assessment for the pipeline, and kind of brings about an awareness from the tribal nations that this would affect their local water source. And then the next is a safety concern versus contamination of water supply again. So the safety concern was on the part of the pipeline and what that would do in terms of how you transport the oil. So that was about saying like the oil boom was the best option for doing a safe extraction of oil. And so instead arguing that the train accidents and the highway fatalities coming from transporting oil in a different way were a worse option than doing the pipeline. And then the next framing was kind of the role of big money versus just the amount of people that were petitioning it, and kind of within that too is just the specific rights of the Native Americans. So they did this by kind of framing the voice with the young people involved in it, and then they moved into celebrities, and then they went to Native Americans. So they kind of had a strategy of going into that to where it pointed out the mass of people that were involved, but then also kind of used it strategically to show the different voices that we may care about that would be affected. And then the next one was the historical and cultural issues. So at one point in one of the articles, it mentions that there were burial grounds for the pipeline. So kind of talking about how that's a significant archaeological site, as well as just obviously like kind of very important cultural site that would be that you would have to consider in doing this. So that kind of called upon, is this even like legal to do for the pipeline building? And then the last one was domestic development and the economic consequences of not building. So the argument that this is going to be a huge benefit for those communities as well as just the larger nation to build this pipeline versus the global warming activists. This was a specific article that would be against this specific pipeline and continuing the global, but specifically America's role in fossil fuels.
Okay, so the primary claims makers was everything basically talked about the Army Corps of Engineers, obviously because they were the ones heading everything. And with that was the pipeline company that was the ones like actually implementing the pipeline or potentially at the time. And then a lot was how there was like a big shift, obviously, between the Obama administration to the Trump administration, just with how things were handled. I definitely